bookmaker, and welcome to the Opening Up podcast, where we are peeking into the heads and hearts of extraordinary people from all over the world. I'm your host, Karolina Kvas. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with your friends or use the currency of feedback and give it a little review on iTunes. This will really help the show to spread to people that have never heard about it and who might find it fun or inspiring. If you are a Czech-speaking listener, then you will find this episode in my Kecání bez vzdělání podcast as well. Today I'm talking with Verena Erin Polowy from the My Green Closet. It's a blog, but also a YouTube channel that she's been running for years now, and it's all about sustainable fashion and sustainability in general. I discovered Erin a couple years ago when I was doing my minimalism challenge, and I discovered Capsule wardrobe, and a whole universe opened in front of my eyes thanks to that. And Erin was a huge inspiration for me because not only she has many Capsule wardrobes videos where she actually goes through her wardrobe and sets up different outfits, and it's very inspirational. She also makes videos about deeper issues concerning sustainability, especially in the fashion industry, and she was one of the people that finally opened my eyes about fast fashion in general. What I like about Erin is that she's very gentle. She's not a sustainability Nazi that will put it straight in your face that you're doing something wrong. She's quite the opposite. She's, I think, educating people about how to make compromises that actually make sense in their everyday lives. And that's what we're focusing in today's conversation on as well. We talk about capsule wardrobes and how motherhood changed the way she is approaching her capsule wardrobes. We talked about impulse buying and what are the strategies that she uses to avoid it. We also touched a big topic of furnishing her entire house secondhand and not only saving a lot of money but making her home as sustainable as possible. Last but not least, we're touching the topic of balance because I feel like that's probably the most important thing among all these trends right now, so that we don't get completely lost and feel constantly guilty that we're not doing enough in all that zero waste, slow fashion, sustainability, green, organic, whatever pressures we're putting on ourselves. If you'd like to dive a little bit deeper and you're wondering where to begin with quitting fast fashion, then Erin has an ebook that's called Quit Fast Fashion, and you will find all the links that we are mentioning throughout this episode down below in the show notes. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and now I bring you Erin Polowy. Hi, Erin, and welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I've been, for a while now, one of your patrons, because I found you about 2 years ago, I think, when I was doing my minimalism challenge, and I was like throwing away all that stuff, which looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, it was so much stuff that just went to the bin. But to be fair, I also sold a lot of it and donated and stuff like that. But that was really the first time that I found anything about capsule wardrobes. And you were pretty much I don't know if it was the first video that popped up, and that's how I found you. Anyways, I just really liked you and your style, and I've been following you since. And since then also, I feel like the whole topic of sustainable fashion and sustainability in general has grown much larger than what it was 2 years ago. So that's what I wanted to talk about with you today, mainly. So maybe just for people that don't know who you are, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got into the whole topic of like sustainable fashion and green life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks. So I guess started my sustainability journey probably about 10 years ago or so, when I got a little bit more interested in my impact and reducing my impact. And initially it started kind of more through like food and just kind of day-to-day lifestyle, reducing energy. But then it was in 2009, I started fashion school, and I actually have a degree in fashion design and technology. And in through that, I learned about how really terrible the fashion industry is on so many different levels. Like when we're talking about sustainable impact, the amount of resources and energy and water and chemicals involved in just producing a single garment is really shocking. And then there's also the human costs. So we have labor and we have people who are, growing the cotton and spinning fabrics and sewing and, I'm sure we've all heard about some of the really horrible conditions that people are working in. And this is all to produce clothing. And when I really learned about everything that goes on behind the scenes in the fashion industry, it like shook me and I was like, I can't be part of this industry. And I really questioned sort of where I wanted my career path to go. And then I started seeing people who were doing things in a different way, who were making, better quality garments. They were making garments considerate of the environmental impact of, the human labor, paying people fairly, ensuring safe working conditions, all that kind of stuff. And back then, there really wasn't a whole lot of brands doing that. And that was really inspiring to me to see that there can be a different way of doing things. And so that really set me on this path of researching and pursuing and trying to learn as much as I can about sustainable and ethical fashion, changing my wardrobe, how I shopped. And that kind of led me into capsule wardrobes and realizing that if I buy less, I can buy better quality things. I can buy things that, better reflect my wardrobe, buy things that I'm for sure going to wear. Because, I would, like most people, I would buy a lot of fast fashion, wouldn't really wear it that much. It would just hang in my closet. So yeah, so that really changed my perspective on my wardrobe and building a much more consciously curated wardrobe. And then from there, I've worked in the fashion industry a bit, and I started up my YouTube channel because I started it up right around the time I started my first capsule wardrobe. And there really weren't a lot of other people talking about it on YouTube, talking about sustainable fashion. And I figured, let's just share what I'm doing. And then I've been doing YouTube for, I think 5 years now. And it's been really exciting, and I've really enjoyed being able to share this. And I've also learned so much from other people, from people who are following me, from other people on social media. And it's just kind of grown from there. And there's a lot still to do in terms of changing things, but I think we're getting there. And it's really inspiring to see how many more people are talking about topics like this and sharing their wardrobes and talking about, buying less, buying secondhand, all these kinds of things. So that's really exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember when I first started sorting my clothes a little bit more, to be fair, I didn't have much to begin with because I moved to Australia 6 years ago, and so I've been basically building my wardrobe since then for the last 6 years only because I left everything I had behind in the Czech Republic. But still, I had quite a bit of pieces because you know yourself how it works. Sometimes you buy this, sometimes you buy that. And I remember it was almost exhilarating when I decluttered everything and I just had literally what I loved and what I used and what I wore. And I loved that feeling the other day as well, or the next day when I opened the closet. I was like, oh, this is so easy. I don't really have to go through all the clothing for 20 minutes just to figure out what I'm going to wear today. But then so that's one thing that in the beginning it can feel almost intoxicating in a way. It's such a strange feeling, you declutter the space and you declutter your mind and emotions as well, I guess. But then it's a slippery slope. Oftentimes I feel a lot of us do so well in the beginning because there's the idea, there's the value, there's the motive behind it. But then over time, you start slipping into your old habits. And I just saw I think it's your last Instagram post about how the most sustainable purchase is the one that you never make. And how important it is to resist all the sales, or it doesn't even have to be a sale, just whatever you see in the shops and just strikes you and you love it and you want to take it home. And so I guess I have a question in terms of, Is it still difficult for you, even after all those years, to resist all these temptations? Or have you already, or is it such an important value in your life that you don't even think about it anymore? Like you are aware of the fact that something looks nice and you would maybe want to buy it, but then you're like, no way, there's too much cost behind it that I can't even see. How does that work in your head when you're making decisions like that?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting how mentally things like that have shifted because shopping and buying stuff is it really does affect us psychologically. Like we get a rush of dopamine when we buy things. It's really exciting. It feels rewarding. And there's also, I made a video about this actually, like the sort of psychology of fast fashion, because our brains have this kind of cost, or like a pain pleasure balance. And if we see something and it's like, oh, that's, a beautiful garment, I'd love to own that. We're already kind of getting excited about that. And then our brains will weigh kind of the like quote unquote pain of it. And if the cost is really low, it's like, oh, but it's not even, it barely even costs anything. Like I can get this wonderful, feeling and peace, and I'm going to look so fantastic. And, we have all this marketing, that it really does feed into our psyche and makes us want to buy things. And it's hard to fight that and to break that. And you have to take a step back and kind of check yourself and be like, do I actually need this? Am I just getting excited? And so sales are super exciting because not only can we get that piece, but we can get it for less cost. So less like of the pain of buying something. And it for sure takes time. And I definitely still sometimes get tempted by things, but I think I've learned quite a few tools, just from experience and from like picking things up over time, and also from, what other people do, where first of all, like I don't even go into any kind of fast fashion stores or places that I know. And I used to kind of just out of habit, if I was at a mall or something, I would browse around, and in my head I was like, oh, I'm not going to buy anything. But you still just seeing it and being there, like I said, these stores are designed to make us want to buy things. So removing that, like not even going into places. And a big thing for me was changing my habits around shopping, because I think a lot of us shop for fun, or we shop because it's like a social activity. We go with our friends.
You're bored.
And yeah, exactly. You're bored. There's the whole concept of like retail therapy, which I really don't like, because, there's so many better activities we can be doing for self-care and for our mental state than buying things. But, these things they're very real feelings that people have, and realizing that redirecting those activities. So instead of going shopping, doing something else that I enjoyed, going somewhere else with friends that doesn't involve shopping. That was a big shift for me, because I definitely shopped for fun. So that changed things quite a bit. And then in terms of like, I think we always have desires for different things. You scroll through social media and you see something that's really cute and think about, how it would work in your wardrobe. And I always try to ask myself a bunch of questions before I even consider something. So looking at like, okay, if this was something that I purchased, how long would I wear it? Like, what would I wear it with? And I have kind of a little checklist of 10 questions that I always run through. And if I can't, respond to any of those questions, then it's a no purchase. And I also really try to put time between buying anything. So I wait at least a couple weeks before buying something, because it's so surprising how if you give yourself a little bit of time, often you even forget that you wanted that thing.
That's another thing, right? The urgency behind the sales, that like you got to buy it now because tomorrow it's going to cost like 3 times more again, or they're not going to have it in the store anymore. And it's this whole psychological factor as well.
Yeah, it's scarcity, right? You think, oh, I'm going to miss this. I need to act now. And that's another marketing technique that they use to get us to buy things. So and it's tough, but it's really amazing. And I would encourage people to try that, to, if you think there's something you like, give yourself 2 weeks, write it down, maybe on a wish list, give yourself 2 weeks, and then think before you even look at your list, like what was on my list. And quite often you will forget that you even wanted that thing. So it clearly wasn't that important to you. And so those kinds of purchases that I've thought about that are still there, and in my head, I'm like, okay, I still want that. then it's like, okay, maybe this is something that I actually, could really use and that kind of thing. But especially to having a little daughter now, there's so many adorable baby clothes and they're
Oh my
so
God.
cute and it's for sure tempting and it's like, oh, I could get her this adorable. But yeah, I really try to like she doesn't need it. She's gonna outgrow it soon. And also there's the whole thing of like, where did it come from? Do I really need to be is this worth it? And quite often the answer is no, it's just not worth it.
Do you have those questions handy anywhere so that we could share them with other
I
people?
I do. I have a blog post about
Oh,
it.
okay,
I
perfect.
can
I'll link
I
it
can
down
send you the
below.
link later. Yeah, I think it's like the 10 questions you should always ask before buying
Okay, good.
something. Or,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
like I totally try to do this myself, and I think even the fact that you try to have a curated wardrobe and a capsule wardrobe or something like this, even though it doesn't have to necessarily be those 33 items or how many they are, that makes me personally think much more about what I want to buy because I sort of go through this like mental designing app in my head and try to match everything with everything and if it actually makes sense to put the pieces together and then like oftentimes I'm like I don't actually have anything to wear it with. I would have to buy another 3 pieces of clothing just to wear this one, so it doesn't really make sense. But then I guess like
Yeah.
another big thing is that people are not used to spend the money for the quality garments now, are they?
Yeah.
So like it's really I even for myself again like sometimes I feel like you were talking about the pleasure and pain balance. I totally feel like this. It's almost painful sometimes to like see
Hmm.
yourself giving all that money for one piece of clothing when like you could go to H&M and get a $7 t-shirt, right? So
Hmm.
I really have to remind myself of all the good reasons and things sometimes. Now, for example, we're going to be moving and just like you guys did not long ago, had to buy a lot of stuff for a new house and or get it somewhere secondhand. It's not even clothing, right? Like it's everywhere. Like it's
Yeah.
the cushions in the home decor departments, and again, like they're colorful and beautiful and soft, and you can already see yourself lying on the couch with all the beautiful cushions, and they have them in sale. So it's like, yeah, sometimes it's very tiring, I would say, like to think about everything all the
Hmm.
time. That's probably one of the reasons why people just eventually get back into their old habits a little bit. So that would be my other question is like, how do you find, and now especially being a mom, how do you find a balance in between some level of comfort so that you're not like stressing out about making the right decision all the time and researching everything and driving maybe
Hmm.
somewhere that's so much further away than what your actual local store has or whatever, and yeah, and making the right decision? Where is the balance for you? How do you find it in your everyday life?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think it's something that's always kind of shifting, and we each have such different experiences and so many different, such different accessibility to things, whether it's like physically being able to access it or like financially. So there's a million different things we're always weighing, right? And what I really encourage people to do is there's two things that I think are really important to do. First of all, just like I said, giving yourself a little bit of time between that decision of, oh, I want this and I'm buying it. Even if it's like taking 5 minutes in the store to take a step back and think about what kind of role that new thing you're purchasing is going to play in your life, that makes a huge difference because it breaks that impulsiveness. Because what we really want to avoid is impulsive purchases. We want to make thoughtful purchases. And so even if you just take the little bit of time in the store to think, how am I going to use this? Where am I going to put it? How long is it going to last? How am I going to care for it? Is it something I can easily clean? Is it going to get dirty? Just kind of think about how that item works into your lifestyle. And that will already help remove those like really quick impulsive, oh, this doesn't actually work for me when I think about it purchases. And that's huge because I think impulsive purchases really are the worst kinds of things because we're literally just buying it because we want it, because it's beautiful or whatever, and not really thinking about whether it's functional and practical for us. And even if it's something decorative, it's like, do I love this? Do I really, want to have this? Do I want to see this every day? Or am I going to get tired of it in a season? And like breaking that trend cycle, really trying not to follow trends. Because if we're always, buying what the most trendy thing is, so you finding your personal style and saying, okay, this is something that I truly love, and I'm not just buying it because it happens to be the latest trend. Because I think those kinds of things are the purchases that we hang on to, that we actually use. So trying our best to avoid that. And like I said, it can be just a little break that you take in the store to be like, why do I want this?
And you mentioned a really good point about the care, how like oftentimes you buy something and then once you bring it home, you find out, oh, I can't actually wash this. Like it only has to be dry cleaned or hand washed or whatever. And you're like, oh, how am I going to do that? So that's what I try to be mindful of. Like with the cushions, for example, now I did buy one yesterday. but I looked at like, how do I take care of this? Because I don't want to be in a place where like I need to wash this and now I'm like, oh, I can't actually wash this, or it has to be hand washed, and I probably won't do that because I'm too lazy for that most of the times.
Yeah, and it's really good to know what your priorities are. So everybody's going to have different priorities when it comes to things, like care, because some people are going to want stuff that they can, machine wash. Other people maybe don't mind going to the dry cleaner, whatever. So knowing what your priorities are. Do you have certain priorities when it comes to like what the material is made of, or like everybody's going to have different things, or how it works into your lifestyle. So knowing what your top priorities are in terms of you and function, like style also, and also if you have any priorities when it comes to more like sustainable and ethical values. So I always tell people to, you're never going to check all the boxes. You're not going to be able to find something that's like the perfect piece that's also, the most sustainable, and it's fair trade, and it's, locally made, and all these kinds of things. If you're trying to do that, you're going to get overwhelmed and really frustrated. So I always tell and really encourage people to pick a top priority and start there. And so maybe that's, buying locally made products, or maybe you're going to focus on natural materials or more sustainable fibers, or maybe you really care about like the ethics and you want to focus on fair trade. And so then if you just have one top priority, like it makes it a lot easier to search for those things instead of trying to do everything, because it's impossible, especially at this point with what's available, to check all these boxes. So even if your priority is just buying something that's good quality, that's going to last you, those are all fantastic. And it gives you something to focus on, which then I think takes out a lot of that extra, just all that extra research and thought process and everything, because you just have one thing to focus on, where I'm going to find, try my best to find something that meets this criteria. If there's any extras, that's fantastic, but this is the one thing that I want to focus on. And I think that really helps with trying to be a bit more responsible with purchases. Yeah.
No, that's definitely a really good advice, because it can be super overwhelming, especially then, like, if you also think about all the greenwashing, that's another big thing, right? How, like, a lot of brands, they're like, oh, this is sustainable, this is organic, and you're like, oh, okay, so you see the label, and again, like, maybe you don't have time to do all the research because, like, you have different priorities and values in your life as well, right? So, but I found that there is a lot of apps right now actually where you can put the brand in and it tells you what their sustainability score actually is. So I forgot the name now, but I'll try to look it up and put it in the link down below later as well. That's really helpful for me. I'm not sure if there's anything for other products, like we were saying, like maybe home decor, like furniture, things like that, because that's another, right? That's another big thing.
There are some sites that kind of do ratings based on, I think Good On You is the one you're talking about, for fashion. There's a couple also sites that do, they have some kinds of like rating scores of different companies. I do think those are great as a starting point. However, I would just say that their criteria are all based on different kinds of things, right? And so they weigh things differently. They might not necessarily weigh things the same way you would. Like, for example, I know some people who like animal rights and like animal products are extremely important to them, right? And a lot of these apps don't weigh that as highly,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
or like cruelty-free products or whatever. So it's a great starting point. Like for sure, I think it's really good to be able to, especially to know like, oh, this company isn't actually doing very well. Um, but you do want to kind of just get a little sense of it. Does this thing actually match kind of my personal criteria when it comes to these things? And it's also a little challenging with those because everything is so nuanced, right? Like one company may be doing really amazing with their products. So they have really sustainable products, but maybe they have a ton of like packaging waste and they ship things really horribly. And
Yeah.
so again, like no company is going to be perfect. And like I said, focusing on one thing is really good. I do think those apps are really, really valuable as a starting point. So
Yeah.
saying, like you said, like you're in the store, you're like, oh, I want to get a bit more information about this company. Like, check it out. They can be really useful for that. But home decor specifically, I'm not sure if there's none that I can think of. I think there is a website maybe, I'll look it up maybe and link it to you if I can find
Okay.
it. But I think there are a few other ones that rate them. Yeah.
And that's another whole topic is motherhood in these things and how like going back to your wardrobe for a bit. Have you noticed, I don't know how about you, but for example, for me, I feel like my chest is wider a little bit now after having a child and hasn't really gone back. And I mean, you don't even have to have kids and be pregnant. Your body changes. And sometimes for some people, it changes a lot. Like, did you have to change your capsule wardrobe a lot because of having a baby? Like, were you able to go back to your old clothing and use it as much as you used it before? Or like, how did you even deal with all the maternity clothing? I know you did a lot of secondhand shopping, which I think is great. So did you give it back to charity shops afterwards? Or like, how has pregnancy and motherhood changed your capsule wardrobe, I guess, in
Yeah,
the
for
long run?
sure. So yeah, it was definitely a new experience for me, having to really shift and change my capsule wardrobe through that. I did get a lot of maternity clothes secondhand. I think I got almost all my maternity clothes secondhand. I did get a few new pieces that weren't necessarily maternity clothes, but that I could wear. And I was really lucky that a lot of my pieces that I had from before also just continued to fit because I did have quite a few kind of like oversized and looser pieces, which were totally great for wearing those. And after I did donate those back to like the local thrift stores. So hopefully somebody else can use them. I do think if you're able to like give them to somebody else, that's
Yeah.
even better. Unfortunately, I didn't know anybody that was pregnant that could use them, but that's a really great option too, to kind of like pass them around. And something which I also saw, which we unfortunately didn't have here, but there are a few companies that have maternity clothing rental services, which I
Oh,
think is
that's
a
awesome.
fantastic idea. Yeah, so they send you a bunch of key pieces that you could just use for your pregnancy, and then you can send them back and they rent them to somebody else. So concepts like that I think are really great. But yeah, so that my capsule wardrobe did have to shift quite a bit for while I was pregnant. And then now it's been really interesting kind of adapting my capsule wardrobe a bit. So nursing for sure, I need like nursing friendly tops. That's been a bit interesting. There's some pieces that I haven't really been able to carry on both for fit and just practicality. So those pieces I currently have in storage, and I was gonna give myself at least like 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year to kind of see where my body goes, what's happening, and then reassess if those are pieces that I want to continue hanging on to. Because it is like I love, so many pieces in my capsule wardrobe I absolutely love. So I don't necessarily want to get rid of them if I don't have to. But yeah, so I'm just giving myself some time to kind of readjust and see, and then reassess those pieces. And I have had to get a few new pieces just to make my capsule function a bit better. And yeah, I mean, with any kind of body changes, you kind of have to adapt a bit and sort of see where you're at. And I tried to get pieces that were flexible with that in mind, that my
Yeah.
weight has been, fluctuating and changing. So not getting pieces that are like super fit and tailored, which wouldn't fit me right away. So just, yeah, trying to be a bit conscious of that. But it's been a learning experience. And I think with any capsule wardrobe, you're never going to be at that point where you're like, it's done. My capsule wardrobe is finished. It's perfect. Like it's going to be this way for years. It's always fluctuating and changing a bit. So I always see it as just a learning experience and taking what I can learn from that and using it to maybe move forward, have a bit more insight into the pieces that I'm putting together for my capsules.
And I think the whole secondhand shopping thing is so good as well. I think like maybe this can be partially cultural as well, but I feel like from where I come from, Czech Republic, which used to be Czechoslovakia, communist regime there and all these things, and there weren't really that many new things in general that you could buy because there was just nothing on the market. People relied heavily on secondhand stuff or stuff that they made themselves. So I feel like ever since we had an actual open trade economy, people are even more crazy about all these things because they couldn't get them before, right? So we even have that, I would say maybe, well, on one hand, I don't think we are as consumerist as, for example, the rest of the Western world because we just weren't used to that and we're still kind of getting there. But on the other hand, like we value new, beautiful things that you can buy in a store more than stuff that you could, you know, get as a hand-me-down or in a second-hand shop. But I think especially for my generation that's kind of hasn't been affected by this as heavily, that's a really good alternative as well. And not even mentioning the fact that oftentimes if you find more like a vintage clothing, it's even better quality than what you can buy today because back in the days like they made stuff to actually last, right? Which is kind of funny that like you might end up buying a sweater from the 80s that will last you for the rest of your life.
Totally. Yeah. It's amazing. Some of the quality of vintage pieces. Yeah. It's really crazy.
One more big topic I would like to ask you about is the whole new house and how you put stuff into your new house and buying furniture and things like that, because you moved not too long ago and you kind of went on a mission of buying as few things as possible and getting as much as possible secondhand or as a hand-me-down or just trying some other way how to get it sustainably. And we are actually going to be moving in a couple of weeks ourselves, and I find this super exciting, this whole idea, and again super intimidating at the same time. And so if you maybe could tell us a little bit about this experience and touching again on the factor of like comfort versus, you know, like really focusing on your mission and doing it the way that you ideally wish for, because I can imagine like moving is stressful already without anything else, right? And then like focusing on getting all the stuff sustainably, secondhand, preferably, that must be so exhausting sometimes as well, because it takes you so much more time and effort and everything. So what your experience has been like?
Yeah, so it was quite an experience. It definitely, yeah, like you said, it does take time and effort. We were really fortunate. So to go back a bit, like we moved from Germany to Canada, so we basically had nothing when it came to like furniture and home things. We just had, you know, a few boxes that we had in storage at my parents' place when we came back. So yeah, like we weren't moving with a lot of stuff at all. We basically were starting from scratch essentially. But what we did have, which was great, is we had quite a bit of time, because we knew, like we purchased our house, I think like 3 months before we actually moved in. And then before that we were like looking for a house, and we were living in a rental, so we had a furnished place, so we didn't need anything for that. So we were really fortunate that we had quite a bit of time to look for things and slowly kind of accumulate things, because I think if you're doing a quick move, it's really challenging. A couple things that we did which helped us out a bit is I kind of pre-planned the house in a way, and that was really helpful for me to wrap my head around what we needed in the space. There's a free tool that I found online called Home by Me, which allows you to input the dimensions of your rooms, and it creates like a little floor plan basically. And I found that super helpful because we measured the house quick. We were really fortunate. And if you're looking at a house or renting anywhere, I would highly encourage you to like ask if you can just measure the rooms. so that you can in your head get a sense of the size, because then before you move in, you can kind of already plan how your furniture is going to fit. And that was really great because I was like, okay, we have this room. We're going to need some kind of like sofa or sitting area. Great, we can fit something here and fit something there. So I already in my head had a sense of what kinds of pieces of furniture we wanted and would work in the space. And so that gave me a good list of things to kind of use. But it's challenging because we also, while I do really believe in like a minimalist lifestyle and only having things you can use, like you said, I also want a space that's comfortable, that has some style to it. Like I'm definitely not into the blank white, like no furniture sort of look. I do want a place that really feels homey. So I tried to kind of use what was already existing in the space and kind of use that to our advantage. So things like because when we moved in, the people before us had left quite a bit of storage, and they also had done some really interesting things where there was wood paneling on the walls. And so I tried to take what was already there and kind of use it in our style. And then in terms of setting up the space, I just scoured like online buy-sell sites for things that I knew that we needed. And once I picked a piece or picked like a color in the room, I sort of built it around that. And that made it a bit easier again to kind of focus on. So if we were looking for, a large piece, or I already decided like, oh, I'm going to have like a big wooden table. Okay, what else do we need in the space? Like, let's plan it around that. And really thinking back to what do we use on a day-to-day basis and what's actually functional in our lives. And I wanted to start off with kind of the minimum amount of things and then only buy more things, especially when it comes to kitchen stuff. I found that really useful. So it's like, okay, we're going to need for sure like a pan, maybe 2 different sizes of pots, like some bowls, plates, that kind of thing. But let's start off with as minimum of stuff that we actually need. And then when we're cooking and making things in our kitchen, if we're continuously thinking, oh, we really could use this, we really could use that. Like a toaster, for example. Like we didn't get a toaster at first. And then quite often we were like, oh, it'd be nice to have some toast. We could really use some toast. Like let's, and we were like toasting in the pan, and it was like we actually like obviously need a toaster. Let's get a toaster. So we tried to kind of live in the space a bit before we added on some of those extra pieces. And I found that really useful to make sure it was things that we did need. And then also, asking friends and family, if there's so many people that have home things that they don't use at all. We had quite a few family members that were like, oh, you're moving, I have some extra these things, like, do you want them? That kind of thing. So yeah, getting stuff from friends and family was really useful.
I don't know if you guys have this in Canada, but here in Australia, we have what's called rubbish days, where people just put stuff they don't want anymore in front of their houses, and then the council comes and collects it. But before they do that, you've got kind of like 2 days or so, and people oftentimes take stuff just from the street because sometimes it's really good still, nothing wrong with it. It's just that, I don't know, maybe people just are bored of it, or they, it doesn't fit their style anymore. And I kind of like the upcycling thing again, how you can even you can buy a spray bottle and spray it into a different color than what it originally was and give it a new coating of paint or whatever, and all of a sudden you have pretty much a brand new piece of furniture, unless it's obviously broken or something wrong with it, that you've got bugs in there or something. But that's another pretty good thing. And again, I guess it's a lot about getting over that mindset and mentality of like, oh, you're moving into a new home, so everything needs to be new as well, and has to have that kind of a new smell of, newness.
And it's like, I was looking at, what people spent to furnish homes, and it's unbelievable the amount things can cost. I believe when I calculated out, to furnish an entire house from scratch, I think we spent about 5,000 Canadian dollars. That was everything. That was all our furniture. And when I was looking at other people, they were spending a lot of estimates were like, oh, it's at least, it's $1,000 just to furnish one room, like a living room or something like that. So it's super budget friendly if you're able to, focus on secondhand things, only focus on what you need. And we got absolutely everything we need. And it's also like when you're talking about upcycling and using those pieces, something that I also think is good to remember is if you're getting things secondhand, you're you can oftentimes resell it for what you got for it. Or if you got it for free, you can give it away. And so you can use that to also test out things. So maybe it's not the most perfect piece, but you're like, okay, I really need a shelf. We need something, here to put this stuff on. Get that secondhand shelf. If it doesn't end up working out, it's not like, oh, we spent, $200 on this.
Yeah.
You don't have that same guilt, I found. So you can pick it up, if you get it secondhand, or if you, even better, got it for free. If you find something better along the line, then you can give that to somebody else or resell it. And I found that was kind of a bit liberating because it didn't feel like, oh, I'm making all these new purchases. I want to make sure it's like the exact right piece that I'm going to have for the next 10 years. Because I do really believe in buying quality pieces that are going to last. But I just find that if I get it secondhand, there's that sort of freedom to be like, I could also, let this go if I find a better option that works a bit better for us. So that took that pressure off, I think.
What's the most frustrating in this process for me is the communication with people, because sometimes it's oh man. So that's when I get really impatient when I've been texting with someone for 3 days and then they just all of a sudden stop communicating or whatever. You probably know this all too well from your experience. And that is very exhausting and draining because, you've got already all these other things going on as well. And that's usually when I snap and when I'm like, okay, that's it. Let's just go and buy something in the store because I just can't handle this anymore.
And I've noticed that is different. It's definitely very cultural, I've noticed, because different places I've lived, people interact with those kinds of buy-sell sites differently. And that's been really interesting because I found in some places, a lot more people, they're way more likely to list things and to get stuff. And there's more of a, I guess, openness and a sharing culture. And some places people are very much strict about it. And, there isn't that kind of that I guess that openness about it. So I totally know what you mean. It can be really frustrating, but yeah, I've interestingly noticed that it does seem to be different kind of based on whatever city you live in and how people use those platforms, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But it was only to illustrate the fact how, for me, oftentimes it comes down to, again, talking about the balance and how, I'm just getting too stressed out about this whole thing. And, even though my intention was good and I still stand by it, I just, can't handle this anymore at the moment. And sometimes it is regarding things that you have to get immediately, right? So it's not like you can wait another 3 months. So let's say if we're buying a couch, for example, something to sit on in the living room. So then I'm just I already decided about this one. We're getting that in a store. We're gonna pay some money, but even some extra money for it. But just getting what we want when we want it, and not communicating with someone for months, and then in the end not having anything because somebody changes their mind or whatever.
Yeah. What we did was we set ourselves deadlines for certain things that we knew that, and it's okay, if we can't find the right piece by in 2 weeks, then we're going to go with a new piece. That's how we dealt with it anyways, because there were certain pieces that we knew that we needed something pretty specific. And we were, looking quite a bit, and it was okay, if we can't find anything by this time, then we'll get something new. And that I found worked out pretty well too, because it was okay, we'd search, maybe talk to a few people. If it didn't work out, it's okay, well, we tried, we gave ourselves this.
That's a really good tip, actually. I think that's very helpful. And so how many things, maybe just proportionally, did you end up buying new in the end?
I'm trying to think. So the biggest thing that we purchased new was we needed a sofa bed for the basement as just a place for guests to sleep. And I was very particular about the kind of sofa bed that we got. And there's of course cleanliness issues with beds and mattresses and that whole kind of thing. So there was a lot going into that. And a lot of pieces that I didn't feel comfortable getting secondhand. I wanted something that wasn't, if it was used, I didn't really want it to be, it was basically a new or barely ever been used kind of condition. And possibly even just without the mattress, and we'd get a new mattress. So that kind of thing. So that was the biggest purchase that we made new, just because I couldn't find what I wanted, and what fit our needs. And then I'm trying to think of anything else big. I think we got maybe a couple other things. Maybe like, I would say maximum, maybe like 5% of the stuff we got was maybe purchased new. And some of it was just some weird odds and ends things that we couldn't, like garbage cans, actually, surprisingly. I was like, oh, it's literally a garbage can. We should be able, but people don't
Yeah.
resell or give away garbage. Like, we had to buy a new garbage can, which really bothered me because it's obviously a thing for garbage, but I just couldn't find any.
Maybe just people need them too much because they're wasting so much stuff all the
Yeah,
time.
exactly. So I thought that was really like ironic. So a few little, odds and ends, things like that
Yeah.
that we just couldn't find, we picked up new. But in terms of big furniture pieces, we got almost everything. I'm thinking through almost everything secondhand, except for, I think the big sofa bed and a dresser, I believe, that we also got new.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, but like I said, we were really lucky. We had a lot of time to
Yeah.
work through that and collect things, so that really worked out well for us.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the tips. I think I'll be using them myself because, the app that you have mentioned with the floor plan making, my home by me was cool.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And even all the other things. Okay.
Yeah,
I
good luck
know.
with your move. I mean, I know that it's quite a lot to deal with, and I think honestly, anything you can do, like, just to kind of touch on this again, going back to this idea of priorities, and you're never ever going to do anything 100%, but I think just remembering, like, anything I am able to do, that's a great step, and that's so much better than what we're kind of conditioned to do, and what society, like you said, there's so much pressure to do all these things, and then there's personal pressures, there's time pressures, there's all these things. So whatever you can do, even if it's just, I'm going to focus on buying pieces that we're going to have a long time, like stuff that I really like, that already is a huge step. So I think focusing on those positives and what you can do instead of getting hung up on the things you can't do or the things that don't work out, I think that's really important to kind of keep that mindset of any step you're taking is a really good step.
Yeah, it's also good in lowering the stress levels when you're getting into this. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Erin. I know you gotta run, so I don't want to hold you much longer, but thanks for taking the time and speaking with me today.
Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, same for me.
Thanks a lot for listening. I hope you found the conversation inspiring. If you did, please don't forget to share it with the world or leave it a little review. I'll be thrilled if you send me any feedback or a little love note to my Instagram account at Karolina_Kvas, or you can check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/KarolinaKvas. Thanks again. I hope you have a great day, and until next time, bye.